Hello, you. Have you ever felt like someone was staring at you and you didn't know why? Have you ever walked into a room and the energy shifted as if your very presence triggered something in someone else? If so, maybe it's because you're carrying a light they're not quite ready to face. And today, we're going to open a door together, not to run away from it, but to understand why they see you the way they do. And more importantly, why it's time for you to see yourself through a new lens. And it all begins with something that might seem small. They said something about your face, Aries. If one day you walk into a quiet room and suddenly feel a shift in the air as if all eyes flicker toward you like you've done something wrong, please don't be afraid. That feeling, it doesn't come from guilt. It comes from the light inside you, the kind of light that makes others turn away. They're not looking at you because of your hair or the depth of your eyes. They look because you awaken something in them they're not ready to face, something real, something powerful, something dangerous in the most honest way, the kind of energy that can't be ignored. And so the whispers begin about your face, your eyes, your presence, or the way you walk into a room. They speak as if they understand you. But the truth is, they're only speaking about the parts of themselves you've unintentionally stirred. You think they're judging you, but really they're judging themselves through you, through your honesty, through the way you refuse to hide, through the way you never apologize for simply existing. Your face, Aries, is just an excuse, an easy thing to point at, an easy subject to criticize. But what truly unsettles them is the raw energy that radiates from your soul. Because when you walk into a room, you don't bring lies. You don't wear masks. You don't decorate yourself with empty smiles. You simply walk in, carrying truth, and truth, it confuses people. It makes them uneasy, because truth carries its own light, and light never negotiates with darkness. People are quick to forgive flattery. They easily accept a fake smile, but they can't handle an honest gaze, not the kind that makes them feel exposed the moment they meet your eyes. You are not a victim of judgment, Aries. You are a mirror, reflecting the parts of themselves they've abandoned. You are the light that makes the shadows tremble. That's why they talk about your face, as if it's something they can analyze, dissect, pick apart. But the thing they fear is not what's on the surface. It's the way you refuse to bow. It's the way you keep your head high even when all eyes are on you. You remind people of who they were before they learned to kneel, before they chose silence over truth, before they learned to perform just to be loved. That's what you awaken, a memory that hasn't taken form yet, a part of their soul quietly stirring again. This world has grown used to pretending, used to wearing masks, used to choosing safety over sincerity. And then one day you walk in with truth in your heart and light in your eyes. You don't do anything, you just show up. And that alone starts shaking loose everything that was hidden, because you're not like them. You don't live to be liked, you live to be real. And in this world, Aries, being real is the most courageous act. If there's one thing I've learned from the soul's journey, it's this: truth always provokes a reaction, but that reaction says nothing about you. It speaks volumes about the fear inside them, because light only blinds those who have forgotten who they are, because your presence only stings when they are no longer connected to their own soul. You might feel hurt when they talk about you, especially when those words come from people you once trusted. But don't let that pain fool you into thinking you were wrong, because the truth is you're living right. And maybe, deep inside the hearts of those who judged you, there's a quiet whisper from their soul that says, "I wish I could live like you." And that is the truth no one dares to say out loud, but you can feel it deep in your intuition, in that sacred place where your soul keeps whispering, you were never wrong for being real. So next time you enter a room and feel the tension rise, remember this: it's not because you're too different, it's because you're too real in a world that's trying so hard to forget who it is. Aries, don't fear those stares, because if they're looking at you like you're the problem, what they are really seeing is a mirror they are not ready to face. You don't need to disappear just to make others feel comfortable. You don't need to shrink yourself to fit into a world built on pretending. All you need to do is keep being real, keep loving with your whole heart, keep guarding that light inside you, because that light is the one thing darkness can never understand, but will always retreat from. And one day you'll realize the most important thing was never what others saw in you, but what your soul still chooses to do every time it's seen, and still decides to stay wide open. But the real turning point doesn't lie in those stares. It lies in the silent, instinctive reaction from your own soul when you feel yourself being seen through, and that is what leads us to the next layer, where you'll finally understand why you and only you were the one being called. Not everyone gets criticized. Not everyone walks into a room and becomes the subject of whispers. Some people pass through life like a shadow, easy to forget, easy to accept, easy to blend in, but you're the sudden breeze that stirs the air in a suffocating room. You don't have to speak. You don't have to try to stand out. Your presence alone changes the energy. You're not being talked about because you're wrong. You're being talked about because you live honestly. In a world built on pretense, compliance, and the constant urge to keep the peace, some souls were not born to fit in. They were born to break ground, and you are one of them, not just different, but sent here to awaken. Your soul carries the frequency of the pathfinders, those who refuse to settle, who refuse to stay silent when something was wrong. You may not fully remember this, but you've brought with you something ancient from lifetimes before. You carry the light of truth, not a flashy light, but a steady one, persistent, unapologetic, uncompromising. You don't know how to pretend. You don't speak just to please. You live in a way that makes people either love you or feel deeply uncomfortable around you. And that is not a flaw, that's the test. A test for everyone who meets you, because every soul that lives truthfully becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look in the mirror, especially when it doesn't reflect the version of themselves they want to believe in. When you live from truth, you don't need to shout to make an impact. Your silence alone makes people confront themselves. When you say no to what doesn't feel right, you're not just protecting your own boundary, you're redrawing the map for everyone silently watching. And for that, you might become a target, not because you're weak, but because your existence reminds them. They've been playing a role they no longer believe in. They may mock you, label you as too sensitive, too serious, too much, but deep down, they know you're right. Not right in the mind, right in the soul, the kind of right that stirs something ancient. While the crowd rushes with the current, you're the one who stops and asks, do I even want to go this way? That question alone, unspoken even, makes people feel uneasy, not because you're creating conflict, but because your presence itself becomes a question, and not everyone is ready to answer it. Society praises truth, but shuns those who live it. People fear eyes that don't look away. They fear voices that don't tremble. They fear anyone who dares to say, I'm done pretending. You weren't chosen to be the one everyone likes. You were chosen to knock on the doors of souls that have forgotten how to wake up. It will be lonely. It will be challenging. But it will also be the greatest gift you offer this world. You're not being talked about because you're strange. You're being talked about because you're more honest than they thought you were allowed to be. And in a world full of people changing faces to match the crowd, the way you stay true is both admired and feared, because if you can live like that, it means they could have too, but they didn't. And that's the part that hurts. Not in you, in them. You're not being attacked because you're wrong. You're being stared at because you're living proof that truth is still possible. And sometimes that makes people feel small, so they talk about how you look, about how you move, about how you don't fit the mold, but the truth is, who you are is already shaking something deep in them. That's why you're the only one who gets singled out, not because you deserve to be hurt, but because you were sent here to touch what no one else dares to. You don't have to do anything grand to be seen. Just don't abandon yourself, and that alone is a revolution in a world exhausted by its own need to be accepted. And sometimes that courage is the very reason they can't stop watching you, even in silence, not because they hate you, but because you awaken something they once believed in and left behind. And somewhere in the middle of all those looks, there's one gaze that feels different. No judgment, no defense, just a quiet stir that moves in another direction. A gaze you'll recognize soon as the doorway to an even deeper truth. Not everyone in that group looked at you with disdain. Not all of them joined in on the judgment. There was someone, a single gaze that felt nothing like the rest. They didn't look at you with suspicion, but with a silence that caught in their throat, a quiet hesitation, as if they had just come face to face with a piece of their former soul. Did you feel it, that moment? No words were spoken, but something stirred in the air, a kind of silence not from coldness, but from longing. You reminded them of something, not a clear memory, but a feeling that once they had lived like you, believed like you, dreamed like you, But over the years, they had learned how to forget themselves. In their eyes, you weren't someone to mock. You were a reminder, a quiet mirror showing them the face they had long abandoned. The one before they traded dreams for the safety of adulthood. You didn't have to speak to stir that feeling. Just your presence, honest, unguarded, unafraid, was enough to knock gently on the door, where their heart had long fallen asleep. Maybe you thought everyone in that room was the same, cold, complicit, but the truest tremble is often the quietest. Not everyone knows how to approach someone like you, with words, but someone did with their eyes, and that gaze, it wasn't there to judge. It came to say something they've never dared say out loud. I used to be like you, but I lost myself long ago. You can't save them. You can't rewind time and relive their brave youth for them, but you can keep being you. And in doing so, you're offering something more sacred than any advice. You're giving them permission to find themselves again, not through words, but through hope. That's the beauty of a soul that doesn't run from itself. Because when you live in truth, you don't just reach the ones who support you. You awaken the ones who used to be you but took a different path. Someone looked at you not with their eyes, but with the ache of something they never dared admit. They don't hate you, they hurt, because you still hold what they once lost. And in that space between you and them, a space filled not with words but with silent understanding, you planted a seed. No one knows when that seed will bloom. Maybe years from now, maybe one quiet night when they're sitting alone, and your eyes return like a soft light in the dark. And in that moment, they'll finally understand you didn't live to be accepted. You lived to stay true to yourself. And when that realization comes, for the first time in years, they might feel forgivable because you, in a wordless instant, opened the first door on their journey back toward the light. We never truly know who we're healing just by being ourselves. The soul knows. Your soul knows exactly why it showed up in that room. And if you still remember that gaze, if your heart still tightens at something you can't name, then know this: you touched the most beautiful part of them, the part they had forgotten. Maybe you'll never speak to them. Maybe you'll never hear them admit a thing, but something shifted, and you felt it in that soft pulse, where the soul always knows before the mind catches up. The deepest connections are rarely spoken. They leave only a silence just wide enough for a soul to realize they still have a chance to come home. And when you feel that, when you know you've touched someone with the truth of who you are, you'll also understand something else. The truth never belonged to them. It's always been right there, in the quietest place within you, where you now ask yourself, how do I keep going when I carry both? Their silent gaze and my own wound. There was no apology. No eyes looked back in regret. When the winds turned against you, no one came forward to admit they were wrong. And you stopped waiting for it. Forgiveness didn't arrive like some noble declaration. It came quietly, like a deep breath in the middle of the night, when you finally realized if you kept holding onto this pain, you wouldn't be able to breathe anymore. You didn't forgive them because they deserved it. You forgave because you couldn't carry this weight for one more step in your journey. Forgiveness isn't about making peace. It's not about going back. It's not about proving you're better than anyone else. It's about freeing yourself from the invisible rope that kept your heart tied in tension for far too long. You once believed that. Maybe if they realized what they did, if they finally understood, they'd come back and say something. Just one sentence would have been enough. But time passed, and what you came to realize is this: the one thing you truly needed wasn't an apology. It was a lighter heart. When you chose to forgive, you chose to let go of the need to be compensated for the pain you endured. You stopped playing the role of the one who was hurt. You no longer needed anyone to validate that you deserve something better, because now you believe it for yourself. Buddha once taught, letting go isn't about losing. It's about returning to yourself, what no longer belongs to you. And when you let go, you don't become empty, you become whole. Forgiveness is an incredibly quiet act. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't ask for applause. It belongs to the heart, to the breath, to every step you take that no longer treads on old anger. People often confuse forgiveness with weakness. They think it means surrender, but that's not true. Forgiveness is what happens when you've walked far enough with your pain to know you don't want to live with it anymore. And to do that, you need courage. The courage not to strike back. The courage not to need reasons. The courage to love yourself more than your need to be right. The highest one in the room isn't the one standing on a stage, holding a trophy of power. It's the one who can stand in front of the person who broke them and still keep their heart soft, still intact. You don't need to explain. You don't need to defend. There's nothing left to prove, no one left to convince, because you've already understood the truth inside you, and when the heart understands, the mouth no longer needs to speak. Your soul wasn't born to seek justice through punishment. It came here to be reborn through compassion, and that compassion doesn't move outward, it turns inward, toward the part of you that once felt broken, angry, resentful, and now you're letting it go. Like a late afternoon rain, no one needs to notice, no one needs to understand, but something inside you has softened. Forgiveness is when you choose to keep walking without dragging their shadow behind you, and suddenly you realize you no longer need them to see. You no longer need them to make it right, because the most important thing has already happened. You've become a softer version of yourself. There's something magical that happens inside a person when they forgive, even when no one says sorry. They grow. From the inside, they look at the world with less bitterness in their eyes, and they start to feel free, in a way no wound could ever hold. That kind of freedom can't be measured, can't be returned by someone else. It's only found when you turn inward and nod to yourself. And when that happens, the world around you starts to shift too, quietly, little by little, as if the universe was just waiting for you to put it all down so it could finally open. A new door, a door that couldn't unlock as long as your heart was still clinging to the broken pieces. But now that you've let them go, the biggest things in your life will begin to arrive, not rushed, but surely. Not every loss is the end. Some things disappear just to make room for the light to enter. And you, after everything you've endured in silence, are approaching something you haven't even dared to name. A new gate, a threshold no one else can cross for you, a sacred land where there are no whispers behind your back, no eyes hiding blades, no invisible gaps that make you feel like a stranger in your own life. This is a place for the soul that walked through the dark, but never lost its inner light. You no longer have to lower your head to be accepted. You no longer have to dim your light, just to fit into the small frame others painted for you. There, you will be seen for who you truly are, not through the lens of their fears or expectations or their need to box you in, but through the eyes of souls who have learned how to see with the heart. The universe is quietly rearranging everything. Every separation, every misunderstanding, every crack you thought was random, was written into the divine blueprint, long before you even knew which path you were walking. Nothing is random. No one leaves your life without purpose, and no one stands beside you now. Unless they're ready to truly see who you are being called, not by people, but by a voice, sacred and old, echoing from inside the dreams you once forgot. And this time, you don't need to explain why you're different. You don't need to prove your worth. You only need to show up fully whole, because light never asks permission to shine. It only needs clean air. Breathe freely. You once tried to fit in. You shrank. You yielded. You lived within someone else's limits, just to keep the bond, to feel less alone, even when you knew that place could no longer help you grow. But now, everything's changing. You're no longer in a season of endurance. You're being invited into a new chapter, where no one interrupts your voice to force you back into their mold, where no one looks at you like you need to be fixed in order to be loved. And the most beautiful part, you no longer need them to feel worthy. You are already enough. In the eyes of God, you have never lacked. You just forgot the sacred light He placed inside your heart when you were still a child. Now God is knocking again, not to blame you for your moments of weakness, but to remind you, you were not born to beg for acceptance. You were born to shine. This path may feel lonely, but that loneliness is holy. It's the space where your soul speaks loudest. And in that silence, you'll begin to look back on those who left, not with bitterness, but with peace, because you didn't lose them. You're just cleansing your journey, keeping only the one strong enough to walk beside you on a road with no space left for anything false. When a new gate opens, some old doors must close. Not because you're selfish, but because you've grown wise enough to know the difference between true love and energy disguised as companionship. The most sacred thing isn't keeping everything. It's knowing when to release what no longer feeds your soul. And that's exactly what you're doing, quietly, clearly, with gratitude, even for those who hurt you, because they helped you realize only real light can survive the storm. Every step you take right now may feel quiet, but it echoes in a realm far holier than you can imagine, because you're stepping into a place where you don't need applause to feel safe, where you no longer have to fight to exist but can finally breathe fully as yourself. And to walk this path with power, sometimes the most important thing isn't finding someone new, it's learning how to love yourself again, with eyes purified by truth. Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror and quietly wondered how far that person staring back at you had to go just to earn this silence? Your face, it's not just skin or a pair of eyes. It's not just a canvas holding age or a surface reflecting soft morning light. It's a living map, a sacred journal, etched with the roads you've crossed, the pain you never spoke of, the nights you fell and no one saw, and the quiet mornings when you rose without needing an audience. Some people look at you, and all they see is a strange expression, a guarded look, a face that doesn't match what they expect. They treat you like a puzzle, as if you need fixing. But what they don't know is this: they've never walked where you've walked. They weren't there when your soul felt hollow in the middle of the night. They didn't see you smiling at sunrise while breaking inside. They don't know that the silence on your lips is the result of hundreds of moments when you chose not to speak just to keep the peace for someone else. They never saw the child in you, who once longed to be seen, who waited and waited for a hug that never came. Your face, every line, every soft edge, is not a mark of fading beauty. It's the memory of a soul who matured in silence. Each wrinkle is a lesson, each glance is proof that you refuse to give up, and every time you step out into the world wearing that face, you're telling the universe, I have lived, I have endured, I have risen, and I am still here. We live in a world obsessed with appearances, where faces are labeled, judged, dissected, but no one teaches us this truth. Your face is sacred. It is the home of a soul learning how to love itself again. No two faces are alike, because no two journeys are the same. When you stand in front of the mirror and you stop seeing flaws, stop counting wrinkles, stop fixating on time's marks, and instead you see light, that's when you know you've come home to yourself, to the kind of love that doesn't need approval, to bless the face life gave you. Your face doesn't need to be liked. It just needs to be seen, with the heart, with full presence. No edits, no filters, no apologies for having been exactly who you were. And if today you're still asking, am I beautiful enough? Do I look acceptable? Do I make others comfortable? Then please pause for just one moment, close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, and ask yourself, how many wounds have I lived through without breaking? How many secrets have I held just to protect someone else? How many times have I smiled through tears, loved without being loved back, forgiven without hearing I'm sorry? If you've done even one of those things, then no one on this earth gets to decide if your face is worthy. You are already sacred, not because you're flawless, but because you are honest, not because you were praised, but because you stayed true. In a world that kept trying to turn you into someone else, don't let anyone judge you by your face. They don't know that behind those eyes is a whole universe of emotion, a sacred history of a soul rising back to life. Treat your face like a treasure, because it is. It's your personal scripture, written in tears, in faith, and in awakening. And if today you still wonder whether you are good enough, please hear these final words as a blessing from one soul to another, softly spoken but meant to reach the deepest part of your heart, the place no one else gets to enter. But you don't always have to be strong. You don't always have to carry the world on your shoulders, and you're not here to please everyone. Some days you're tired. Some mornings you look in the mirror and all you see are the things that feel not enough. There are moments when all you want is silence, to disappear for a while without needing anyone to come find you. And all of that doesn't take away your worth, not even a little. You don't have to get everything right. You just have to be real with yourself. Real in your pain, real in your softness, real in the moments you didn't know how to keep going, but still you didn't turn back. Being real doesn't mean you're always right. It means you don't betray your own feelings just to make others feel comfortable. No matter what they said, no matter how they whispered, even if their words stung like needles in your chest, the truth is, it was never about them. It's about you, about the fact that you're still you, fierce, tender, unapologetically real. You don't shrink just because they think you shine too bright. You don't bow down to those who don't understand you, and you sure don't apologize for living with a full heart. This world needs more people like you, people who still live with soft hearts in a hardened world, people who still choose compassion, even after being hurt again and again, People who dare to look truth in the eye, even when it makes others look away. You don't need to be understood. You just need to live truthfully, and when you live in truth, you give others permission to do the same. That is the greatest gift you can offer this world. Not your talents, not your accomplishments, but your presence, without apology, because living truthfully isn't about defeating anyone. It's about no longer being afraid of your own reflection. Thank you. Thank you for listening until the very end, with an open heart, a quiet soul, and the deep knowing that these words, they didn't find you by accident. They found you because your soul was ready to remember what it has always known. What you just heard wasn't a lecture. It was a soft reminder, from soul to soul, from a place deeper than thought, where only real light can reach. And if you felt that light, then you are no longer standing alone. I wish you this. May you have enough peace to let go, enough courage to stay true, and enough love to embrace the face you once thought wasn't perfect, because that face is living proof that you've been real all along.